Have you ever stood tall, carrying the weight of a fallen hero's sacrifice, only to be told you don't belong? Colonel Marcus Evans, a black Army officer in his crisp uniform, steps into a crowded Atlanta airport, escorting the remains of a young soldier. His mission is sacred, but an airline clerk's cold dismissal, "Sir, your ticket is not valid," cuts deep. The terminal buzzes, unaware of the injustice unfolding. What happens when one man's duty ignites a firestorm that rocks an entire airline to its core? Watch to see how respect fights back. The Atlanta airport buzzed with the chaos of a summer morning in 2025. A symphony of rolling suitcases clattering over tiled floors, the sharp hum of fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow, and the faint aroma of overpriced coffee drifting from a nearby kiosk. Families shuffled toward gates, kids darting ahead of weary parents, while business travelers tapped furiously at their phones, oblivious to the world. Amid this restless tide stood Colonel Marcus Evans, 45, a black Army officer whose crisp dress uniform gleamed with medals earned over 2 decades of service. His polished shoes clicked softly as he navigated the terminal, his broad shoulders squared under the weight of a sacred duty. Evans was here to escort the remains of Private First Class Aisha Thompson, a 22-year-old soldier killed in a training accident, back to her family in Chicago. A West Point graduate, the son of a nurse and a bus driver from a modest Atlanta neighborhood, Evans had climbed the ranks through grit and resilience, facing subtle biases at every turn. His dark eyes, steady and resolute, hit a personal ache. Aisha had served under him years ago, her infectious laugh at a unit barbecue still echoing in his memory. She was more than a name on a casket draped in the American flag waiting on the tarmac. She was a promise kept, a soldier who deserved to go home with honor. Evans adjusted his hat, his posture radiating quiet authority, expecting the respect his uniform and mission commanded. Yet as he approached the airline counter, a young clerk named Karen barely glanced up from her computer, her indifference a stark contrast to the gravity of his task. Her nails clicked on the keyboard, her expression flat, as if Evans were just another passenger with a lost boarding pass. Behind him, the terminal pulsed with life. John, a retired Marine in a worn USMC cap, lingered nearby, his weathered face scanning the crowd. Maya, a college student with earbuds dangling, scrolled through her phone, and Sarah, a mother juggling a toddler in a diaper bag, whispered to her husband about their delayed flight. These strangers, unaware of the drama about to unfold, would soon become players in a story bigger than themselves. Evans set his military orders on the counter, the paperwork crisp and official, detailing his role as Aisha's escort. Karen's eyes flicked to the documents, then back to her screen, her frown deepening as if the orders were an inconvenience. "Sir, I'll need to check something," she said, her tone clipped, offering no acknowledgement of the uniform or the mission. Evans nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier. Everything's in order." Karen's hesitation, a fleeting sideways glance to a co-worker, hinted at trouble brewing, a subtle dismissal that stung more than it should. Evans had faced this before, moments where his rank, his service, his very presence seemed to be questioned. Not because of his actions, but because of who he was. His jaw tightened, but he held his composure, years of discipline keeping his frustration in check. The terminal's noise seemed to fade as the moment stretched, the weight of Aisha's sacrifice pressing heavier on his chest. He wasn't just here for himself. He was here for her family, for every soldier who never made it home. The contrast between his solemn duty and Karen's casual disregard was jarring, like a flag flown at half-mast in a room full of chatter. John the Marine shifted in line, his eyes narrowing as he caught snippets of the exchange. Maya, sensing tension, slipped one earbud out, her thumb hovering over her phone's camera. Sarah, balancing her toddler, glanced over, her brow furrowing as she sensed something wasn't right. The terminal, a microcosm of strangers thrown together, was beginning to notice. Evans stood taller, his medals catching the light, a silent testament to his authority. He knew the procedures for military escorts, flights arranged months in advance, paperwork triple-checked. There was no reason for delay, no policy to justify this. Yet Karen's fingers paused over the keyboard, her silence louder than the airport's din. Evans leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "Ma'am, this is a military assignment. I need to know what's holding this up." His words were polite but carried the weight of a man who had faced combat zones and diplomatic standoffs, a man who wouldn't be brushed aside. Karen's co-worker, a supervisor named Greg, appeared, his name tag crooked and his smile forced, ready to repeat the same vague excuses. The air grew thicker, the crowd's murmurs softening as they turned their attention to the counter. A young man in a hoodie pulled out his phone, recording discreetly, while an older woman in a red blazer whispered to her, "Companion, why are they giving him a hard time?" Evans felt their eyes on him, not as a spectacle, but as a symbol of something larger, a soldier standing for another who couldn't. His mission was clear: get Aisha home. But the airline's indifference was a hurdle he hadn't anticipated, a small but piercing injustice that threatened to tarnish a sacred duty. John's hand tightened on his coffee cup. Maya's camera lens glinted, and Sarah's toddler grew quiet, as if even he sensed the shift. Evans adjusted his hat again, a subtle gesture of resolve, his calm exterior masking the fire within. He wasn't leaving without answers, and neither was the crowd now watching, waiting for the moment when respect would demand its due. The terminal, once a place of routine chaos, was about to become a stage for a reckoning, one that would echo far beyond its walls. At the airline counter in the Atlanta airport, Colonel Marcus Evans stood resolute, his military orders laid out like a sacred contract. But Karen, the young clerk, barely glanced at them before muttering, "Sir, there's a security verification issue with your ticket." Her tone was flat, as if his mission to escort Private Aisha Thompson's remains was just another line item to check off. Evans, his uniform pristine and medals glinting under the terminal's harsh lights, kept his voice even. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier. These orders are valid." Karen's fingers hesitated over her keyboard, her frown deepening, and she glanced at her co-worker, a subtle signal that set Evans' instincts on edge. He'd faced this kind of dismissal before, the kind that lingered just beneath the surface, questioning his presence without saying it outright. A supervisor, Greg, stepped forward, his name tag askew and his smile forced, like a man used to deflecting complaints. "It's just policy, sir," Greg said, his voice dripping with rehearsed politeness. "We need to verify your documentation." Evans raised an eyebrow, his calm unshaken. "Verify what exactly?" "The Army doesn't send me with invalid orders." Greg's smile faltered, and he asked for additional ID, his tone carrying a faint skepticism that stung like a paper cut. The request wasn't just procedural, it was a challenge, as if Evans' uniform and decades of service weren't proof enough. Behind him, the terminal's hum softened as passengers took notice. John, the retired Marine with a worn USMC cap, shifted his weight, his weathered face tightening as he overheard the exchange. Maya, the college student with earbuds dangling, slipped her phone from her pocket, her thumb poised over the record button. Sarah, the mother juggling a toddler, whispered to her husband, "Why are they harassing him?" The crowd's restlessness grew, a murmur rippling through the line like a gathering storm. Evans handed over his military ID, his movements deliberate, his eyes locked on Greg's. "This is a military assignment," he said, his voice low but firm. "Private Thompson deserves to go home with respect. Explain the issue." Greg's response was a vague repeat of policy, his hands gesturing emptily, as if words alone could dismiss the weight of a fallen soldier's casket waiting on the tarmac. The air thickened, the terminal's chaos fading into a tense hush. Karen avoided Evans' gaze, her nails clicking nervously on the counter, while Greg doubled down, his voice sharper now. "We can't override the system, sir. You'll need to wait." The word wait landed like a slap, a casual dismissal of a mission that carried the weight of a nation's promise. Evans' jaw tightened, but his composure held, forged in years of facing down worse than bureaucratic arrogance. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady as steel. "You're telling me a fallen soldier's escort has to wait because of your system?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, exposing the absurdity of their stance. Greg's eyes darted to Karen, then back to Evans, his confidence cracking under the scrutiny of the growing crowd. John the Marine stepped closer, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You're denying a colonel escorting one of our own? Explain that to me, right now." His words carried the gravel of a man who'd seen too much to stay silent. Maya, her phone now recording, angled it toward the counter, her live stream capturing every word for the world to see. Sarah, clutching her toddler, raised her voice, her tone fierce despite her soft appearance. "This is about a soldier who died for us. How dare you make him wait?" The terminal's energy shifted, passengers no longer just waiting for their flights, but watching a drama unfold, their phones emerging like torches in the dark. A young man in a hoodie started typing furiously, tweeting the scene with hashtags that would soon catch fire. An older woman in a red blazer muttered, "This is wrong," her words echoed by others in line. Evans stood firm, his posture a silent rebuke to the airline's indifference, his medals a testament to his authority. He repeated, "I need to know the policy that stops me from honoring Private Thompson." His calm was a weapon, each word measured, forcing Greg to confront the flimsiness of his excuses. Greg's face reddened, and he snapped, "We don't make exceptions, even for your situation." The pause, the glance at Evans' uniform, carried a hint of bias, racial, military, or both, that cut deeper than any policy could. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that signaled the line had been crossed. Evans's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady, slicing through the tension. "Are you saying a fallen soldier's escort doesn't qualify as an exception?" The question was a challenge, not just to Greg, but to the entire system he hid behind. The terminal went quiet, the usual airport announcements fading into the background, drowned out by the weight of the moment. John folded his arms, his stare fixed on Greg, who shifted uncomfortably, his authority unraveling. Maya's live stream ticked upward, comments flooding in from viewers across the country, outraged by what they saw. Sarah's husband pulled out his phone, sharing the video with a veterans group, his fingers trembling with anger. A man in a business suit, waiting in line, shook his head and muttered, "This is a disgrace." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a chorus of disapproval that Greg could no longer ignore. Karen's hands froze over her keyboard, her eyes darting to Greg for rescue, but he was floundering, his excuses crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. Evans stood taller, his presence a beacon in the terminal, drawing every eye. He wasn't just a man in a uniform. He was a symbol of duty, of sacrifice, of a promise to a young soldier who'd given everything. The injustice of his treatment burned, not because it was personal, but because it dishonored Aisha's memory, her family, and every soldier who'd ever served. Greg tried to backpedal, stammering about checking with management, but the damage was done. The crowd wasn't just watching now. They were invested, their phones capturing every second, their voices rising in support. A young woman near the back called out, "Let him board!" Her words sparked a ripple of agreement, passengers nodding, some clapping. John's voice boomed again, "I flew with military escorts. There's no policy for this nonsense." Maya's stream hit 1,000 viewers, the hashtag number LetHimFly climbing social media charts. Sarah's toddler, sensing the tension, clung to her, but she stood firm, her eyes locked on the counter. The terminal had transformed into a stage, and Evans was its center, his calm defiance a challenge to the airline's arrogance. Greg's face paled as he realized the situation was slipping beyond his control, the crowd's anger a force he couldn't contain. Evans adjusted his hat, a subtle gesture of resolve, his eyes never leaving Greg's. He wasn't leaving without answers, and the crowd wasn't either. The tension was electric, the terminal holding its breath, waiting for the moment when justice would turn the tables. The Atlanta airport terminal crackled with tension as Maya's phone, held steady in her hand, broadcasted Colonel Marcus Evans' standoff with the airline to thousands online, her live stream's view count soaring under the hashtag LetHimFly. Comments flooded in, furious and heartfelt. "This is an outrage, and honor our soldiers." John, the retired Marine, posted a clip of the exchange on social media, his caption blunt, "Disrespecting a colonel escorting a fallen hero?" Shame. Sarah, the mother with a toddler now clinging to her leg, shared Maya's video with a veterans group, her post sparking a wave of retweets that pushed the story toward virality. The crowd's murmurs grew into a restless hum, passengers pulling out phones to record or tweet, their voices blending into a chorus of indignation. Greg, the supervisor, retreated behind the counter, his face flushed as he dialed for backup, while Karen, the clerk, stared at her keyboard, her earlier confidence gone. A senior airline manager, Mr. Lawson, hurried in, his navy suit crisp, but his expression strained as he scrolled through his phone, eyes widening at the trending hashtag number, LetHimFly. He approached Evans, his voice overly smooth. "Sir, we apologize for the mix-up. We'll get you on the next flight, first class, no charge." The offer felt hollow, a band-aid on a wound that cut deeper than a delayed flight. Evans, his uniform a beacon of authority, fixed Lawson with a steady gaze, his voice calm but piercing. "This isn't about a seat, Mr. Lawson. It's about respect for Private Thompson and every soldier who serves." The crowd leaned in, phones still rolling, as the terminal's air grew heavy with anticipation. Then a new figure entered the scene. Major Lisa Chen, a military officer with a commanding presence, her boots clicking sharply on the tile. She stopped beside Evans, her voice clear and firm. "Colonel Evans, the Army has secured a private flight for you and Private Thompson. You're not flying a commercial today." The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of applause rippling through the terminal, some passengers saluting, others wiping tears. Maya's stream exploded. The hashtag number, Respect Our Heroes, climbed to national trends as viewers across the country shared the moment. Lawson's face paled, his tie suddenly too tight, as he stammered, "We were just about to resolve this, sir." Evans didn't flinch, his eyes locking onto Lawson's. "If no one had spoken up, would you still be checking your system?" The question landed like a thunderclap, exposing the airline's failure in a single breath. The crowd roared louder, John's gravelly voice cutting through with a "damn right." Sarah's husband nodded, his phone still capturing the scene, while a young man in a hoodie tweeted, "Airline just got schooled." Lawson shifted uncomfortably, his authority crumbling under the weight of the crowd's outrage and the military's intervention. Major Chen stood tall beside Evans, her presence a silent promise that the Army takes care of its own. The terminal, once a place of routine chaos, now felt like a courtroom, with Evans as its moral center. Passengers whispered in awe, their phones still recording, some streaming to platforms where comments like "Justice served" and "Respect our troops" poured in. Lawson tried to salvage the situation, muttering about a system error, but his words drowned in the crowd's cheers. Evans adjusted his hat, his posture unwavering, and turned to Chen with a nod. "Thank you, Major. Let's get Private Thompson home." The crowd parted as he moved toward the exit, their applause following him like a tide. John the Marine tipped his cap, a silent salute to a brother in arms. Maya's stream hit 10,000 viewers, her comment section a flood of American flags and angry emojis aimed at the airline. Sarah hugged her toddler, whispering, "That's how it should be." The hashtag number, Respect Our Heroes, trended nationwide. News outlets picking up the story with headlines like, "Airline denies soldiers mission, faces backlash." Lawson stood frozen, his phone buzzing with alerts from corporate. The airline's mistake now a national scandal. Evans didn't look back, his focus on the casket waiting outside, draped in the flag Aisha had served. The moment was cathartic, a triumph of duty over bureaucracy. But it wasn't just about him. It was about a young soldier's sacrifice, a crowd's courage, and a system forced to face its flaws. The terminal buzzed with a new energy, not of chaos but of unity, as strangers became allies in a fight for respect. Evans's question lingered in the air, a challenge to Lawson and to everyone watching. What would have happened if no one had cared enough to speak? Colonel Marcus Evans stepped onto the private military flight, the weight of his mission steadying his every move as Private Aisha Thompson's flag-draped casket was loaded with quiet reverence. The Atlanta terminal, once a battleground of bureaucracy, faded behind him, its cheers still echoing in his ears. In Chicago, at a windswept cemetery, Evans stood beside Aisha's family, her mother clutching the folded flag with trembling hands. The young soldier's laugh, bright and warm from a long-ago barbecue, lingered in his memory, a reminder of why he'd fought so hard to bring her home. As the bugle played taps, Evans's eyes traced the horizon, his heart heavy with the truth. Respect shouldn't need a viral video to be earned. Back in Atlanta, the airline reeled from the fallout. Maya's video, now viewed millions of times under hashtag #RespectOurHeroes, sparked a boycott that trended online, with passengers canceling flights and sharing stories of their own. News outlets reported a 5% drop in the airline's stock, and a coalition of veterans groups filed a lawsuit, alleging discriminatory practices and demanding accountability. The airline's CEO issued a polished apology, but the words rang hollow, drowned out by the public's demand for change. Evans, watching the headlines from Chicago, knew apologies weren't enough. This wasn't just about one flight or one soldier. It was about a system that too often failed those who served. At Aisha's graveside, he vowed to honor not just her, but every soldier by ensuring this wouldn't happen again. He partnered with veterans organizations to launch a campaign, training airlines on military escort protocols and advocating for policies that prioritize dignity over red tape. At a press conference, his voice steady but fierce, he said, "This isn't about me. It's about every soldier who deserves to come home with respect." The crowd, a mix of reporters and veterans, nodded solemnly, their applause a quiet promise of support. Evans' composure throughout the ordeal taught him the power of standing firm in one's truth, a lesson etched in his unwavering calm against the airline's dismissal. The passengers, John with his Marine grit, Maya with her live stream, Sarah with her fierce compassion, proved that community matters, that collective voices can shift the tides of injustice. Their phones, their outrage, their refusal to stay silent turned a single moment into a movement. Yet Evans knew viral outrage was only a spark. Systemic change demanded relentless effort, the kind he'd poured into his campaign. It wasn't enough to shame the airline. The system itself needed reform, a commitment to ensuring no soldier's escort would ever face such disrespect again. Standing by Aisha's grave, he felt the weight of that responsibility, not as a burden, but as a call to keep fighting. The lessons were clear. Dignity under pressure can move mountains. Strangers can become allies when they speak as one. And lasting change requires more than a moment's anger. It demands action. Evans looked at Aisha's mother, her eyes glistening with pride and pain, and knew this fight was for her, for Aisha, for every family waiting for their hero to come home. He thought of the terminal where ordinary people had chosen to care, their voices amplifying a truth too often ignored. If respect was non-negotiable, then silence was unforgivable. He turned to the crowd at the press conference, his words a challenge. If you believe in honoring those who serve, don't just watch, act. Share this story. Speak up when you see wrong. Silence lets injustice win, and our soldiers deserve better. The reporters scribbled, the veterans nodded, and the message spread, not just as a headline, but as a call to carry forward. Evans adjusted his hat, the same one he'd worn in the terminal, and walked away from the podium, his mission far from over. Aisha's laugh echoed in his mind, a reminder that every soldier's story mattered, and every fight for respect was worth it. The world was watching now, and he'd make sure it never looked away.